The US ambassador to Canada just did an interview with Politico that was quite revealing about the Trump administration's approach to dealing with its northern neighbour in the coming period. So let's discuss where we are. Quick recap first. So President Trump's attack on Canada with massive tariffs and his jibe that the country should become the 51st state of America, well, that all backfired on him. He managed to sink the MAGA-light candidate, Pierre Poilievre, and ended up electing the Liberals back to power with Mark Carney in charge. And in a successful meeting at the Oval Office, which is a concept that has been redefined to mean that the event was endured without triggering public tantrums, Carney and Trump seemed to put the talk about the 51st state to bed. Carney said never ever, Trump smiled and said never say never, and it was apparently good-humouredly passed over. Doesn't mean Trump won't come back to it, because he kind of doesn't have an off switch and he doesn't learn by experience. But it seems as though we're now at the point of asking, okay, so what now? Canada is still being assaulted by higher tariffs. Can a deal be struck with Trump to change that? Or is Carney's task now predominantly to start what must surely be a long and painful process of reorientating Canada's trade and its foreign policy to be much less exposed to the United States? To be fair, that latter probably happens anyway, since even if tariffs get lowered in the short term, don't think anyone in Canada wants to have vulnerability to US political volatility exploited like this again in the future. But it turns out that the Americans are being somewhat thin-skinned and incapable of recognising the consequences of their own actions, and so they're starting to complain about that. In an extended interview with Politico, Trump's ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, complained that Canadians had banned certain American products from their store shelves in the immediate aftermath of Trump calling for their annexation and for his trade war. That is an insult to us, he said. We have not done anything like that. Where do you even go with a comment like that? Your president literally said that you would use economic force to push Canada into becoming the 51st state. You ridiculed the former prime minister, calling him the state governor. And then you applied the tariffs on the demonstrably fake justification of all the fentanyl that wasn't flowing across the Canadian border. Those tariffs looked remarkably like exactly the economic force that had been promised. And now you're all hurt because the targets of all that decided they didn't want to buy your products. I mean, you couldn't make it up. We've heard Trump going on and on about how the United States doesn't need anything that Canada has and doesn't want it. He wants America to use its own lumber, its own energy, and so on. Sure, Canadians taking his own words to heart, that's going to make you go all hurty and sad. More important, though, is the question. If Trump has, for now at least, abandoned the idea of annexing Canada, then what is its attitude going to be towards Canada going forward? The thing that really became clear from the Hoekstra interview is a theme that we've heard numerous times now. The administration really doesn't know what it wants. He said that Trump had laid out the priorities, keep America safe, secure and prosperous. Those were his marching orders. I'm sure there was probably something about apple pie in there as well. More than that, he said, was down to Canada. Mark Carney needs to submit a proposal on a revamped economic and security agreement with the United States. If it's deemed by Hoekstra to be a serious proposal, it goes into the pile for consideration. If, however, it's deemed to be a joke, straight to the bin. No clues given as to what defines which category, except that he seemed to imply that if Canada does what it's been pushed to do, what Carney promised to do in the election, to diversify Canada's trading base, that would not be seen favourably. He said this: "Is it an agenda in a platform that creates the case for giving Canada the best deal of anyone, of any country in the world? Because of what we do on energy, what we do on autos, on a range of issues? Or is it something else that just says, hey, we're going to diversify. We are now one of 170 countries that America does business with. Does Huckstrap really not understand how that sort of a pitch sounds to people in Canada, given the events of the last couple of months? The US and Canada used to have a trusted and close trading relationship. They used to consider each other to be reliable allies. Trump then kicked that down, insulted Canada over and over again, and slapped on tariffs guaranteed to create widespread economic harm and hardship. Then Hoekstra says in his interview, give us a proposal that shows you deeply care about this relationship and, quote, you see it as a long-term relationship and America as a reliable somebody that you want as a reliable partner going forward. Adding then with just a hint of menace, or if you see something else, maybe prohibit American products from being on Canadian shelves. I don't know. Should we take a vote on how many people here currently look at the Trump administration and find that one of the first words that pops into their head is reliable? But this is the point. Trump has said he wants to reshore industries, including those that currently makes up significant trade with Canada. He repeats over and over his hallucination that America is subsidizing Canada by $200 billion a year, which in reality means that American companies buy $200 billion of goods from Canada, which is not any definition of a subsidy. It used to be called mutually beneficial trade. But Trump is beyond changing his mind on that, or indeed anything else, and in particular because he's surrounded by people who would never dare contradict him on anything, however stupid. And they're saying to Mark Carney, you come back to us with a proposal. We're not going to give you guidance, we're not going to give you any indications of the guardrails, but it just has to intuitively work with the fantasy version of reality our president currently has concocted. You can beg for a beautiful deal on our definition that we can then celebrate as a win, and we'll give you a slightly less crappy outcome than the one we've unilaterally imposed on you. Traditionally, the President of the United States would have some vision of what were the national objectives in a major strategic relationship. They would look to the common ground that could be built on, in the way that Trump was all about the common ground when he was being feted by the Gulf Arab states last week, the ones that have hundreds of billions of petrodollars swilling around. They would have some areas of concern, for sure, some areas of mutual opportunity. I mean, it's not complicated, is it? But it seems the Trump team's vision is simply, we're inflicting pain on you today, we're a bit hurt that you're reacting to that by being mean to us, so give us a proposal to show how much you love us and are prepared to give us in order to get us to hurt you just a little bit less. If a mobster was to say that to you, he'd have a twinkle in his eye while he was doing so, because he'd be wholly aware of the crassness of the deal he's imposing on you. A level of self-awareness that seems to be lacking in the US ambassador. Mark Carney's challenge is going to be to deal with that, while also coping with how the new brutal realities will actually play out in his country. Because it's great in the immediate shock period where everyone pulls together. There's a real sense of determination and common national identity. But we all know that doesn't last, and to all appearances is already starting to dissipate. Canada got hit by streams of disinformation during the election. Well, that's not going to let up anytime soon, and the objective of such disinformation is to divide people. So there'll be more and more people believing some completely fake tropes which have been crafted to make them angry and disaffected. Of course, there are plenty of noises in Alberta right now about whether it should hold a referendum on leaving the country. So unhappy is at least some of the Conservative majority there about the election outcome. The question for Canada, following an election where the Liberal vote squeezed the life out of several of the smaller parties, is whether it can resist the pull to becoming a US-like two-party system with the same toxic polarization that the United States is now becoming famous for. Melissa Jean Gismondi, writing in The Guardian, suggested that Carney has perhaps the toughest job of any Canadian Prime Minister in recent memory. She said this: he must renegotiate Canada's relationship with the US as it descends into fascism. Behind him is a divided country with divided interests. Let's not waste time debating the fascism word. It's very specific and loaded. But let's just say that when do you adjust your stance from a supportive one to a defensive or adversarial one when that sort of transition is happening? An indicator of how this could become divisive that came early with Mark Carney commenting recently how Canadians were not impressed by the UK government's invitation for President Trump to come to a second state visit to the UK. At a time when he was talking about making Canada, with whom the UK shares a head of state of course, the 51st state. Arguably not the time for such a gesture. Obviously, Carney's invitation to King Charles to attend the opening of Parliament is calibrated to send a message, and he does seek closer ties with Britain as part of that diversification, notwithstanding that irritation. It's worth noting that it's highly likely that Charles will enjoy and value his visit to Ottawa a lot more than he's going to enjoy hosting Trump. He would never admit to such a thing, of course. No doubt Trump will claim that he secretly told him he was his favourite president, just as he claimed about the Queen before him, who of course famously never said such things to anybody. If it's any recompense for the, shall we say, mixed messaging of the UK government, at least we can report that British holidaymakers are reported to be ditching the United States as a destination, with Canada the top alternative. Vancouver, Toronto, the Rocky Mountains, all are seeing more British tourists along with other Europeans. Long may it be the case, to the benefit of both countries. The next flashpoint I expect will be the coming G7 meeting, which will be taking place in Canada next month. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that he is not planning to discuss the 51st state idea at that meeting, which is good of him, I guess. But of course he's only pretending that he has the slightest power to predict what tangents his boss will be going off on while he is there. The Trump team and the Carney team as well will be holding their breath for the entire event, just waiting for the possible moment where it all goes horribly off the rails. And of course there'll be plenty of journalists there looking to ask questions to try to bring that outcome about, because that's what global high-level summits are like these days. Maybe the danger point will be the moment when Trump notices that the venue hosting them is only serving Canadian goods. So better get some Coca-Cola in there, because we wouldn't want to hurt his feelings now, surely.